Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So your book is called Sex is a Funny Word. Why that title?
Well, I mean, for starters, we wanted the word sex in the title. A lot of the ways that traditionally sex education gets done is we're kind of skirting around it. So we'll talk about healthy bodies or relationships. But kids know right away, kids learn at a very early age the stuff we don't want them to learn, right? So they know that their parents are really excited when they learn to walk or really excited when they learn new words. And then all of a sudden there's stuff they're not supposed to learn. And sex is one of them. So we wanted to be bold about it. And then the other thing is that sex is a funny word. Like it's exactly, see, you're laughing right now, right? You're a grown up. It's funny weird, it's funny awkward. And so I was part of the approach of the book, and my approach of sex education is to find things to say that are true, for in kind of as broad a sense as possible. And what can you say about sex? Well, one thing you can say is that it's a very funny word.
I love that, just acknowledging that right out front.
Yeah.
Which topics were you interested in addressing, since this book is aimed at slightly older kids than your last one?
Well, I mean, I was most interested in doing things that I haven't seen before. So one of the big things is that I wanted a book that was inclusive for gender nonconforming kids and trans youth. So by that first term, I mean kids, and I was actually one of these kids that for whom, like, boy just doesn't feel quite right, girl doesn't feel quite right, but it's not that they think they're the other or that they know what they are. A lot of us just aren't sure, and somewhere in the middle. And all of us kind of get erased by most sex ed books. And then I wanted masturbation for sure, because that's a very tricky one. But then there was newer stuff. Like, one of the kind of contemporary examples in this book that hasn't been in any other book is the word sexy, which is like a word that kids use. Kids use it. You kids use it because of music videos. And parents don't know what on earth to do with that word. So we actually have a whole chapter on what the word means and how you deal with it.
So this all started with things you've never seen before.
Right, yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, because so I grew up, I grew up in a pretty privileged situation because my dad was a sex therapist. He was a family doctor, became a sex therapist. And when I was born, my mom was still a children's librarian. So I had all the books.
You had the ideal environment for this.
I had the ideal environment, but still, it didn't work for me, right? So I had everything in place, but I was still totally messed up because I didn't see myself in those books. So that was sort of the impetus to make books that for me and then also for my community.
Which topic was the most challenging for you to write about for this particular age group?
So there's two had two different challenges. So probably the least pleasant was that there's a chapter on sexual abuse, and it needs to be in there. A lot of times we take that topic out, right? So a lot of times in the same way that we usually talk about reproduction, I've taken that out. Usually we talk about sexual abuse as something else. But the truth is, if you're going to talk to 8 to 10-year-olds about bodies and touch, you should talk to them about
not good
touch. Exactly, yeah. So that was sort of the hardest because I wish I didn't have to do it. But actually sort of most intellectually challenging was gender, because gender is a super complicated concept. It's very abstract, right? It isn't concrete. You can talk about body parts, that's easy to do, but to talk about how we feel, masculine, feminine, somewhere in the middle, that took the longest to do.
Especially for that age group.
Because you can't, for that age group, you can't get really abstract. Like they want it to be concrete. They'll just keep asking questions. Like, what do you mean if you say like gender is how you feel? Like, what does that really mean?
With their frame of reference, it's difficult. Yeah. What about the illustrations illustrating a book like this?
Right.
What were you trying to do?
Well, the key thing, and the reason that I really love working with Fiona Smith is that we wanted it to be a book that kids like, right? That it's fun. So when you look at the book, it's colorful, it's comics. So it's a format that kids love. And this is kind of the feedback we've been getting is from parents is like, I left it on the kitchen table and my kid just read it cover to cover. And it's 160 pages. It's like long, but it's all comics. So the most important thing for me with the illustrations is just that they are engaging. But then beyond that, of course, you can do a lot of that abstract stuff, right? So there's a chapter on masturbation, and we don't want to show that because, there's nothing wrong with it, but you don't want to show it, period, really, any age. And so Fiona did this lovely illustration of sort of kids going into their own personal biodome thing, where it's basically about them learning about their bodies.
Yeah.
So the illustrations allow you to do things that words just don't or can't.
Can we talk about this intellectual challenge of approaching gender for kids this age? How did you go about that?
Well, I don't know. It took 2 years.
Wow. That particular question of how to...
that was the hardest thing, and it took 2 years to write it. I guess where I start is to think about what can we say that's true for everyone? Is there anything we can say that's true for everyone? And so what we can say is that everyone does feel like one thing, they feel like one thing, and then maybe they can feel like something else. And then we kind of just broke it down the way that I do as a sex educator. So we distinguish what we call sex assignment at birth. So the fact is that we kind of tend to think that we come out as boys or girls.
Yep.
What actually happens is you come out and someone looks at the outside of your body, and based on what they see, they say you're a boy or a girl. And sometimes they're not sure. So we actually told that, first of all, we told that truth, right, which is something we're usually silent about. And then we talk about the ways that we can feel different, right? So feel like a boy or feel like a girl or feel like neither. So we kind of break it down using a lot of illustrations. But the other thing I'll say is that this stuff actually is less complicated for kids than it is for adults. I find as an educator, kids don't actually have, I can say to kids, there's boys, there's girls, and there's the rest of us. And kids are totally fine with that. And if you get anyone from like 13, 14 up to 40, 50, 60 years old, they'll be like, record scratch. Like,
Because
what?
you have to break through sort of prior learnings.
Right, yeah. We all were raised to understand there's only men and women. There's only two kinds of bodies, two kinds of people. So you now need to tell me, you need to re-educate me. If we get kids early, then we don't need to re-educate them. We can actually start with what's true.
You're exactly right. A lot of this stuff is new and even somewhat confusing to a lot of people that are out there. Why do you feel like your approach is the right one to take as far as explaining gender?
Well, first of all, it's inclusive, right? So it's not, I think what a lot of other people do is they say, well, we're going to teach them about boys and girls. And then when they're in their teens, they can learn about, people who are trans, either, trans somewhere in the middle or trans male, trans female. And I don't think we should do that. I don't think we leave everyone. It's like, we're going to give you the history of Canada. And then when you're a teenager, we're going to talk about colonialism. It's like, actually, that's a word that I wouldn't say on the radio, but that's not fair. It's not just, I would say. So number one is I think we should need to start including everyone from the beginning. The other thing that I do, to be very clear, is that I don't actually give a lot of answers.
Yeah,
So,
I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah, it's kind of a unique approach, too.
Yeah.
You give a lot of information, but you never really tell the reader what to do or how to act. Why not?
Because who am I to tell them, right? And particularly, it's so clear to me as a Canadian, right, that it's not my place to say you should tell your kids that sexy is a good word, or you should tell your kids that masturbation is great or bad. We talk a lot about community and culture in the book, and that's where those values and beliefs need to, we need to communicate that stuff to kids. Sex education isn't just about plumbing. It isn't just about body parts. So what we do instead is we say, we ask a question, like at the end of a gender chapter, we say, why do you think people are so interested to know if a baby's a boy or a girl? And that will start a conversation. And then the parents can say what their beliefs are.
So you're trying to provide like a baseline of facts and ideas to sort of help a conversation with parents and caretakers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, some parents, though, they want guidance.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. Not everyone is true.
They're like, how do I talk to my kid about this? What do I say? And what about those parents?
Well, to those parents, I say, look at the book, and, it's available in lots of libraries across Canada, or you could buy it. I think every parent should look at this book and then decide if it's right for them. I think that they will find that, parents often say, I don't know, right? Because they think you need to be an expert about sex. I don't really think there is such a thing. And if they survived their childhood and teen years, then they've already got a lot of information. And so I would say you actually have a lot of answers. This book helps you figure out which questions to ask. And I would also say that the book isn't for everyone, right? The book is like unabashedly feminist, and it's certainly, I don't use the term sex positive, but the book believes that sexuality can be a very good thing in the world. And if you fundamentally disagree with that, then the book probably isn't for you. But even for you, the chapter on sexual abuse is key, because we need to talk to kids about this stuff before it happens.
Cory, your book is coming out at a time when sex ed is a hot button topic here in Ontario. The school curriculum is changing and elsewhere as well.
Yeah.
Thousands of parents are protesting the new curriculum.
Right.
Some even homeschooling their kids.
Yes.
What do you make of these divisions?
I'm surprised by these divisions, right? So I lived my whole life in Toronto, and I was in New York for about 3.5 years. And I was very surprised, and I'm not really sure what to make of them. I think a lot of it is a problem of parents reacting without knowing what's really going on, right? So I've read the curriculum. I would never define it as radical. I mean, and this curriculum itself was written a long time ago. So I think there's fear. I think the other thing that we have to acknowledge is that all of us as adults we have a lot of anxiety about sex. We all have some shame around sex. And so I think a lot of this stuff is us responding to our feelings about sex. And it really doesn't reflect kids. I mean, part of the position I put myself in as a writer for kids is that I'm thinking about kids, not adults. I'm not writing a book for adults and adult politics. And I know what kids can handle and what they can't.
What a lot of people are protesting, it seems like, is the age appropriateness.
Sure.
Based on the sensitive ground it covers, whether or not they're informed about that. What makes you confident that 7 to 10-year-olds are ready to engage with this kind of material?
Because I talk to 7 to 10-year-olds. I think the people age appropriateness is an issue. And of course, I was writing for an age appropriate audience. But I think often it's a euphemism for I don't want my kids to know about that. Right. And I just think if you talk to your kids, if you listen to your kids need to and want to know stuff about gender. They are confused. They're confused as to why in this day and age they're told maybe that the word sexy is bad, and everywhere they look, they see these ads of half naked, usually white skinny women, right? So kids know this stuff, and we're doing them a disservice. So I understand the fear, but I try to what I do is I try to talk to individual parents and try to talk them through it.
You spoke about the just the way kids' minds work too, and their kind of need sometimes for binaries.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I know you strive to be inclusive with this. You brought up culture and religious backgrounds. Some people strongly believe in a value like commitment or marriage or something like that. Can they find themselves in this book?
Absolutely. Yes. We're pro-commitment. We don't, I'm trying to think if we really talk about, I guess we mentioned marriage. Absolutely. I try to write books in a way that absolutely would fit for people who are of faith. So my first book, which is about where babies come from, you could read that book with your kid, and I should say that was a book that was written for a trans family. You could read that book with your kid and then tell them that God made them. And there's nothing in that book that actually would disagree with that. Because I don't say what sex is. I say a lot of different things, but I don't give a final answer. So this book works as well for a conservative religious household as it would for some, atheist liberals, because there's all this space for the parents to inject their own values.
You talked about this book being in libraries.
Yeah.
What would have to change for it to be included in the public school system?
I don't.
Would you have to change anything?
Well,
do you think?
It depends on if you're talking about Canada or the U.S. So it will never be in the public school system in the U.S. I would have to take the word sex out. I would have to stop saying that it's okay to be gay or trans. I'd have to not talk about masturbation. I'd have to rewrite the book. It would have to be a book about, I don't know, rocks or trucks or something. Then it could be in the schools. In Canada, I'm not sure. I know teachers who have used my previous book in public schools in Canada, but it's not part of any kind of organized curriculum. My experience when I travel across Canada, and it's kind of why I find the protest in Ontario surprising, is that Canadians are remarkably sort of not freaked out about sex. Not that they're together, but that we don't have the same American visceral reaction to no, right? Yeah. So I think it may find its way in some ways, although I wrote it for a private audience, right? I wrote it for parents and kids to read, not at school. And I think that there's some things we can talk about at school and some things we shouldn't. From my perspective, there's some stuff that sex educators don't need to do in school.
Like what?
Well, I personally, so this is just me personally, I'm not representing any other sex educator.
Yeah.
Talking about having sex, I think, is weird to do in a group of people. If you're doing it with a group of people you're gonna have sex with, that's fine if you're adults. But as I remember sex education for me, and my teacher was so uncomfortable, and I loved him. It was Mr. Harris, North Prep. Weird Toronto shout out. And it was terrible because he hated doing it. And so the message I got was I got a love of history from him because he loved history, and I got that sex was a bad, weird thing. So I think that if there's some stuff we doing it in a mixed group is a bit risky and weird, and there's just some things. I also think there's some things that we should learn on our own, like how to have sex.
You said there's a difference between Americans' approach to sex and Canadians.
Yeah.
What do you think is at bottom there in that cultural difference?
Well, so people have said, that there's a kind of Puritanism, although I've been told that's the wrong word. But there is there's two things. There's a conservatism in American culture that I just don't see here, and then there's also an organized religious right in the United States, which I don't see here. And so the kind of knee-jerk reaction, this is horrible, they're brainwashing our kids, when nobody even reads the curriculum. That happens so much more in the States. And I
And
think,
that mobilizing as well.
exactly, yeah.
Would you like to see this book in elementary school libraries at some point?
Oh, of course, yeah. I wrote the book. No, I don't think it's good. Yes. It would be great. I mean, I'd like to see it also because I would like queer and trans youth to see themselves at a very early age in books.
Thanks so much, Cory.
Thank you.